What's up, guys? I'm Ed from Guitar Space, and welcome to this month's trade secret. Practice sessions should be fun. One of the difficult things to overcome when you're learning an instrument is enjoying your practice time. Now, remember, it's called playing the guitar, not working the guitar. Nonetheless, there is work that you need to do, and hopefully with today's tips, you'll enjoy doing that work. Now, I'm going to share with you how I make my practice sessions a little bit more enjoyable than just sitting there with a metronome. Now, complete full disclosure, all the gear that I'm going to be using here, I paid for. This is not a sponsored video in any way. I use the gear that I use because I like it. All right. Now, first things first, you got to have a plan. I need to know what I want to work on. So for example, for this session, I'm going to give you some context because I work on multiple things at the same time, and I'm sure many of you do as well. And if you haven't yet, you will. It just becomes part of the process. So let me outline the goals for my session here. All right, the first one is technical. I want to get more comfortable using my fingers to play single note passages. And my second goal is musical. I want to get better at improvisational phrases. So let's unpack these one at a time. All right, my technical goal. I just recently decided to use my fingers instead of a pick. One is I like the tone. Two is that I'm dealing with a lot of physical issues. I've got arthritis, bursitis, tendonitis. Got that in my left shoulder and also in my right hand. So, actually, I've got it in both hands. And picking sometimes causes the tendon to start getting inflamed, So I was driving in my car and I'm listening to Derek Trucks, Jeff Beck, Wes Montgomery, Richie Kotzen, and Mark Knopfler. What all these players have in common is they use their fingers instead of a pick. So I started using it during my practice sessions, and I was surprised as to the lack of pain. Now, I could go deeper into this, but that's probably a video for another time. For our purposes, I want to work on playing single note phrases with my thumb, index, and middle fingers of my picking hand. All right, so I need to incorporate that into my practice session. My musical goal is to play deliberate phrases. And I apply two concepts in to help me do that. It's motifs and phrasing. Now, motifs are short musical sentences that many guitarists call licks and riffs. Now, I use the term motif because lick and riff can be overused, and it can also be considered nonsensical noodling. For me, it makes it sound automatically more serious, so it puts me in that mindset for practicing. Now, pacing is the deliberate use of space. We create deliberate musical ideas to tell a story by surrounding the motifs with space, and that's my goal. See, we guitarists are guilty of playing long-winded, run-on musical sentences, and my goal is to communicate effective ideas, and this is how I practice doing this more. Before I go into that, let me talk a little bit about improv practice. As many of us guitar players are guilty of playing long-winded, run-on musical sentences with little meaning. And even though I work on not doing that, this mindless riffing and flashy licks, they creep into my playing more than I care to admit. Now, in the blues and jazz world, the rhythm section normally plays a steady backdrop, and that makes it easier to create motivic ideas. On top of that, this is a little bit more difficult in the blues, rock, and classic rock world because the rhythm section tends to play chord riffs, or what I like to call riff rock. And this can be challenging. So here's a tip. Use the first lick or licks in the solo to establish your rhythmic motif. This will help you get the idea. So let me explain this for a moment. I'm going to use a backing track in the style of Cream's Strange Brew, and it's a 12-bar blues in A. And in the original recording, Eric Clapton plays a pickup that starts with a short phrase on the end of 3 and follows that with a rest. There's your pacing. That is then followed with a longer phrase that's about a measure and a half that's then also followed with a rest. So it's play, rest, play, rest. Now I'm going to use something similar, and I give myself restrictions and I apply them to this practice session. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to play Strange Brew, the slow blues and in A, and I'm going to play 4-bar phrases made up of 2 smaller phrases. Now, phrase 1 is short, and phrase 2 is longer. And in between each of those phrases, there'll be a rest. Now, I'll change up some of the stuff that I'm doing, but I'm gonna base this on the A minor pentatonic. That's really what I'm gonna use to try to keep everything easy. Now, again, I'm basing my motivic phrase on Eric Clapton, the way that he set up the first 4 bars of the Strange Brew solo. Not the intro solo, the solo during the song. And he starts out with that short phrase, followed by a rest. Then what I'm going to call a medium phrase, because it is a little bit longer. See, the first phrase is 2 beats. Then there's a rest that's almost a measure, and is followed by a longer phrase that's about a measure and a half, followed by a shorter rest going into the pickup and going into the next phrase. Now, he does imitate this throughout, but we're just going to worry about those first 4 bars. There's another concept in here. There's so much in these first 4 bars. Those 4 bars are, it's a short motif followed by a rest, then the response. So he's using call and response. That short motif is the call. You use pacing to separate that. Then you follow with the response. It's a little bit longer. And these are the games that get played while you're improvising. And usually these rests help that motif pop out. It gives the rhythm section a chance to breathe, because if you'll notice where I'm playing, there's a little chord riff that goes on in the background. You can almost hear the conversation between the band, and that's really what you want to go for, is to create the conversation. And what I notice when I play a motif, the band kind of settles into, okay, we're in the solo section. And I leave them the space, and they kind of start to fill up that space, and we start to react to each other, and immediately we're all communicating together. And you go for those, and that's the magic moments that you look for. All right, the backing track that I'm using is from True Fire, and it's one of their multi-track audio jam packs. These things are fantastic, and it's called the Blues Rock Classics. Now, I love these because it's real musicians playing, so you really get a sense of a live feel while you're practicing. Now, practicing improvisation, it doesn't always sound good. These concepts may sound awkward and predictable as you work on them, but as you get comfortable with them, you'll begin to hear the results in a jam session, at a band practice, or best yet, on the bandstand. Now, my challenge here is staying true to the motif and pacing concepts. I naturally want to deviate from these things and let loose. We're not going to do that. All right, guys, before we get started, let me go through the gear that I'm going to be using on this. Just a few pieces. I'm using my Epiphone Les Paul. It's fun. I'm going to be using the Walrus Audio Ages. It's got your volume and gain, but in the middle here on the top, it's got a dry signal. You can mix in your dry signal so you can get a little bit more clarity, which is really nice. It's a nice touch. Then you've got a bass and treble on the bottom row, and in the middle you have this 5 clips. It's 5 different forms of clipping. Now, for this demo, because it's really not about the pedal, I'm just going to keep everything on noon except for which clipping mode is being used. I'm going to be using just the first one. This is the smoothest one out of the bunch. All right. I'm also going into Logic, and I'm recording. I'll give you a screenshot of this. I'm using the Pete Thorne, the Soar Amp Sim. I'm using the preset, haven't touched anything on it. It's just called Blue Humbucker Grit. It's number 6. And this is what it sounds like. And then I add the pedal, and you can hear the difference immediately. I haven't done anything, I haven't spent any time on this, and I've already got a good tone. All right, so now let's get to the demo.
1, 2, 3.
right, so that was basically the idea. Practice sessions can be fun, and I enjoy practicing this way. But it's important to be clear about what you need to work on and what you want to achieve. So make a plan. Use backing tracks and plug in your gear. This will make it a whole lot more fun. I hope you enjoyed this month's trade secret. Thank you for watching. Until next time, practice smart, play from the heart.